Good morning. I'm Rosalie Schaefer, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Manatee County, I welcome you to our program today. We voters have some difficult decisions to make. But it's not only our right to make them, it's our duty as citizens. Voting is what keeps democracy strong. It keeps it working. And this year, in addition to voting for a wide range of candidates, we will also have to decide about some state constitutional amendments. There are 3 ways to get an amendment on the ballot. Legislation. The Florida legislature can create amendments to put on the ballot. Citizens' initiatives. And you probably have seen some of those on ballots. It involved citizens having to get together many thousands of petitions in order to get a measure on the ballot. And the Constitutional Revision Commission. And that's a body that meets once every 20 years and has a chance to look at the Constitution and see what needs to be removed or added. All of these require a 60% majority vote of the citizens. So what should an amendment do? It should be important, and it should be long-lasting enough to claim space in our highest level of state government. Anything less than that could be addressed with legislation, which is much easier to change if situations change. The U.S. Constitution, for example, has only been amended 27 times. And how many will we be voting on? Well, that's a guess at this point. There were 13, but not really. That included the bundled amendments, which contain more than one issue, all of which would be approved if a voter voted yes on that amendment. I counted 25 separate changes in the list of amendments, and that was just this one year. One of the bundled amendments was struck down last week. It's gone. Amendment 8 is gone. We're going to take a quick look at it anyway, but the others have been retained, it's been challenged but restored, or still under challenge. So at this point, we still don't know what the ballot's going to look like. And I've noted that on your amendment sheet, which ones are still under challenge. Why did they bundle these amendments? The commissioner said it was because they wanted to keep the total amendments low in order to avoid voter fatigue, they called it. Well, it seems like voter fatigue has been traded for voter confusion. Not an improvement. The League has studied these amendments and has come up with this PowerPoint program to bring understanding. Then, once you feel like you really understand what it says and what it does, you can vote in confidence. What to do if you like one part of the bundle but not the others? That's up to you. But keep in mind that once it's in the Constitution, it's very hard to get it out again. The good stuff could always be legislated in any time. Okay, let's get started. Okay, this is some information about the League. When we started, what we are nonpartisan. That doesn't mean some of us aren't registered, either one party or the other, or some independent. It just means that when we come together as a group, we are nonpartisan. We don't endorse candidates or political parties. And when we look at issues, we look at, what it says and what it does. We don't look at the political impacts in any way. Okay, here's some of the stuff that's going to be on the ballot. And I want to add that I learned recently that there's going to be a referendum on the school districts. They will be deciding whether or not to make them single-member districts, because right now they serve at large. What does that mean? Well, it means that you vote for all the school district board members, and when single-member districts get passed, they will only have to be voted on by the people who live in their districts. And when that, is, we will be having more information on that when we put out our voters' guides, and we'll put that in there with an explanation of what it does and what it means. This is a proposal by the legislature. The current exemption is $50,000 for homes valued over $50,000. This would increase the homestead exemption to $75,000 for homes valued over $100,000. A yes vote would amount to a loss of tax revenue, but of course it would also mean that you wouldn't be paying as much for your property tax. And a no vote will mean that the exemption will stand as it is. Although it exempts the school district levies, where would those millions of dollars come from? The Florida Association of Counties estimates an annual loss to Florida of $687 million. Everybody understand what that means? That right now, your exemption is $50,000. It'll increase it to $75,000 if your home is worth more than $100,000. And we put the organizations on there that are for or against it, just to show how, some of them are thinking. And if considering Florida it's one of the lowest tax states. It doesn't have a personal income tax. So one wonders, well, where's the money going to come from? Or are we going to have to deal with streets with potholes and crumbling bridges? What are the effects of it? This is just making something that was put on with an expiration date permanent. It's the cap on non-homesteaded property, and that's property that for business or vacation rentals or second homes, whatever's not your homestead. And it was set to expire January the 19th. The source of this amendment was the state legislature. The State Revenue Estimating Conference estimates a loss of tax revenue of $700 million annually.
Can I just ask a question? On taxes, you didn't have a support or who doesn't support the Second Amendment? Did you have a sheet saying who supports and doesn't?
The Second Amendment, the limitations on property tax exemptions, the supporters are Florida Association of Realtors, Florida Tax Watch, and the opponents are the League and the Florida Education Association. Okay, gambling. This is a result of a citizens' initiative. Some groups got together and they sent out petitions to be signed and did petition gathering at farmers markets or wherever and sent them in, and they had enough. And then after they have enough petitions and it qualifies, it still has to be reviewed by the Florida Supreme Court for the language. And sometimes they pass the language test and sometimes they don't. But anyway, this one made it all the way to the ballot. And what they want to do is to have citizens control whether or not there's going to be a gambling casino Now, this doesn't affect all gambling. It doesn't affect bingo parlors or poker rooms. This is just casino gambling. Yeah, a yes vote would preclude legislative proposals to add casino gambling. The legislature could approve other gambling such as poker rooms, bingo, and fantasy spots. A no vote would allow the legislature to make these decisions for local communities. So that's, either you want to be able to vote for whether or not to accept a casino, perhaps in your county or not.
Does this include existing or just future addition? Thank you.
Future. Yeah, the ones who are already there are okay. And it also doesn't affect the Indian casinos because they fall under federal law. And here's who supports it or doesn't. The Florida Education Association does not support limiting the casinos. Anybody know why? I'm not sure, but I think it's because under state law they get some revenue from the casino operations. I know they do get it for the lottery. Okay, Florida is one of only 4 states that prevent felons who have met all the terms of their probation and sentence from getting their vote back. It's in the Florida Constitution that they can get it back, but it has to be restored. And the Constitution doesn't say how it is to be restored. So different governors have taken different views on that. When Charlie Crist was governor, he automatically restored the voting rights of former felons who met all the terms of their sentence, probation, and had not committed any more crimes. And he restored, I think, about 150,000. Now, Rick Scott had a different idea about it. He thought they should all have to go through a hearing. The only trouble with that is that the hearing board only meets 4 times a year. So during that whole period, they may only restore between 50 and 100 or so. And so you have, and it keeps building up to where there are like thousands and thousands of former felons who can't vote, even though they're holding down jobs, they're driving cars, they've got bank accounts, and everything else the citizen can do. They're kept from this one privilege. So it doesn't seem to make much sense. So there's been a move. This was a citizens' initiative to put this on the ballot. But in the meantime, there's also been a court case. And the court case, the judge ruled that it was, unjust for the right to vote to be withheld for these people. But that's under challenge. So we don't know what's going to happen with a legal case, but we do have the opportunity to add our voice to the decision-making. Yes? I can't hear you. Okay.
I should know this, but could you name some felony crimes? Because I really don't know.
Name some what?
Felony crimes.
Felony crimes. Oh, maybe burglary, drugs, burglary. One time, someone cited something as minimal as tampering with a crab trap. Someone found that as a felony in the statutes. So someone could lose their right to vote because they tampered with a fisherman's crab trap. And here are the supporting organizations and the opposing ones. Oh, did I miss something? Okay. Okay, Amendment 5, a supermajority vote required to impose, authorize, or raise state taxes or fees. This would include taxes on sales, gasoline, alcohol, fees for fishing, fishing licenses, firearm licenses. So it's not just, other forms of taxes. And this tells you what a yes or a no means. In other words, they're going to put it in the Constitution that it will require 2/3 of a Senate and House vote to raise any taxes or fees. So it's, there's nothing more popular than a tax cut. But what happens a lot of times is governments run out of money because of all the tax cuts. And then what do? These are all the bundled amendments from the commission. Yeah, this has to do with something called Marsy's Law. A young woman was murdered by her ex-boyfriend, who was released on bail, and her family was never notified. What's the most important aspect of this amendment? Remember, the retirement age decision does not impact those currently on the bench that are at retirement age. The Constitution already covers victims' rights, but there is some concern about the rights of the defendants, especially the rights to file for appeal. The second part of the proposal raises the mandatory retirement age of Florida judges, including Supreme Court justices, from 70 to 75. It also deletes a provision that lets judges complete a term on the bench past retirement age if they were halfway through that term. According to Ballotpedia, Florida is one of the 18 states that sets retirement at 70. Other states have a higher retirement age or not. The third part of this proposal relates to how courts interpret state laws, and this gets a little complicated. But apparently, at present, if judges want an interpretation of a statute, they can go to an administrative agency for their interpretation. And if this passes, they would not be able to consult with an administrative agency that works with this rule all the time in order to interpret it correctly. There is a group called Ballotpedia, and some of them have the full text, the full long text of this amendment. And it is very confusing. Let me see, let me try my, I've got like half a page of description of what this means. And it would do with, there's so many rights to this that law enforcement agencies would probably be pretty busy trying to meet them all. Many of the rights outlined in the proposed amendment already are found in the Florida statutes, and the state constitution has a victims' rights provision. But this measure would dramatically expand and outline in deep detail all those constitutional provisions to include victims' rights to due process, freedom from intimidation and abuse, protection from the accused, protections for victims if bail is granted, and protections from disclosing victims' information. The proposal also allows victims to request a broad array of additional rights, such as access to and notification of all proceedings, the ability to speak at proceedings that involve sentencing or pretrial release, access to prosecutors to discuss various facets of the case, input into pre-sentencing investigation. It goes on and on.
So what that means, how I'm interpreting this particular amendment, is that let's say that you are trying to get an injunction against somebody, and you are going to be a victim if you're getting an injunction against somebody, and the judge is not familiar with a certain set of rules, So now he can't go to that agency, let's say it's an abuse case, he can't go to the people who work with those people all the time and say, so what's the deal here? He can't refer to them because the law prohibits him, and he's got to interpret from what's being presented to him. So how is the victim protected then?
Well, we don't know the full ramifications of how it would
That's
be
what
in
I'm
real
saying, is that's
practice.
how I would interpret how they're kind of giving them this, but they're taking away that at the same time. And because they're putting so much into one amendment.
Right. Yeah, you just don't know how it would play out in practice. And then, of course, the defendant, the attorneys for the defendants will claim that their client has been, deprived of his or her rights. So it's quite a big unknown as to how that would play out. Yeah, see, people live longer now, and when it was set at 70, it seemed fine, but now people are living longer, and I guess they felt like it was time to move it up 5 years. So, whatever. But if you believe in a high turnover in judges, then you would be against it. Yes. Amendment 7, first responder and military member survivor. And this is lumped with public colleges and universities. And the source was the Constitutional Revision Commission. What this does is create a supermajority requirement for universities to impose new or increase existing student fees. It also enshrines in the Constitution guidelines for the state college system. It mandates that employers or the state pay a death benefit to first responders and members of the military killed in the line of duty. The question has 3 parts. The first issue is a new requirement for supermajority votes when universities want to increase student fees or impose new ones. Currently, a board of trustees overseeing a university needs a simple majority of its 13 members to increase student fees or add new ones. The request then needs approval from the state's 17-member board of governors. Under this proposal, 9 of the university's 13 trustees must vote in favor, and 12 of the 17 members of the board of governors must approve the university's request. This proposal does not address tuition, just fees such as universities charge to pay for athletics, health, and transportation. The second part of this question would add a new section to the Constitution addressing the state college system, which includes Florida's 28 institutions formerly known as community colleges. While the Constitution currently addresses the responsibility of school districts and universities, it is silent on state colleges. The additional language proposed in this section of the amendment includes a broad statement of purpose for the colleges, including offering bachelor's degrees, as well as a role in each school's board of trustees and state board of education. The final part of this question creates a constitutional requirement for governments to pay death benefits when first responders they employ or members of the military are killed in the course of their duties. Florida law already provides these benefits to survivors of law enforcement, correction officers, firefighters, members of the National Guard. The benefits would include monetary payments as well as waivers for educational costs. The amendment would provide a new constitutional guarantee of those benefits. And it would add paramedics, emergency medical technicians. An analysis of the State Department of Management Services could not determine how much the additional military benefits would cost, but noted that Florida has more than 90,000 men and women on active duty or in the reserves. Okay.
Hi, I just have a question. Is there a way, as voters, that you mentioned voter fatigue, voter confusion? Well, I'm more confused because of this bundling. Could we get a ballot put on to say no more bundling?
I think that's a really good idea. Well, it's odd because if it had been a citizen initiative, that could never have gotten away with that. When the citizens initiative goes through the Florida Supreme Court, they automatically reject anything that has more than one issue in it. But the review commission wasn't held to that standard, so they went ahead and did it. Again, if you put in the Constitution that they can't, raise fees without a supermajority vote, then that means a lot more time and money is lost to the university. Inflation happens to universities too. Everybody feels sorry for how much it costs these days for a kid to go to school. School board term limits and duties, they are. It mandates term limits of 8 years for all Florida school boards. Allows the state to create public schools. Oh, this one is one of the ones that's been taken off, so what I'm going to do is just show the slides so you can see what you missed. This one is really gone. For civics education, it's already in the state law that schools have to provide civic education. Well, it's funny, they don't mention exactly what schools they're referring to in the text of the amendment. They just refer to them as schools not being part of the district school system or something like that. It's just very vague in how they refer to them.
Wasn't that removed because of lack of clarity?
It was challenged. It was a separate challenge, and the judge ruled that it should be taken off because of the bundling and because of the wording, because the wording was so vague, like not really saying what kind of schools they're talking about. And the judge's decision was challenged, and the challenge went up to a higher court, and they rejected the amendment as well. So that's why it is really, really dead, at least this year. Okay, here's one. It's a good example of how they said, well, we're going to bundle amendments that are similar. They're going to say, offshore oil, gas, and vaping. I would not vape anywhere near an oil well. Everyone likes the idea of no offshore oil drilling. That's a whole big process. The governor appoints a lot of them. The legislature appoints some of them. There are very few, like ordinary citizens on that board. It's all, it's all done with people who are already in the political arena.
Question. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were done.
Go ahead.
Are you saying that if you have one yes or no vote for all of 6 through 13, that's one vote? Or are they breaking them out?
No, there's,
I know, okay, so I thought she said 1 through 13 was, earlier was one. Good, I feel.
well, the commission proposed a number of amendments, and there's one vote on each one of them, The confusing part is they put more than one issue into most of their amendments. Oh, that one was one of the ones that were challenged because of the bundling. And, yeah, and that's one that hasn't been judged yet. It may or may not appear in the ballot. Okay. 10. This amendment requires the legislature to hold its sessions in early January on even-numbered years. It creates an Office of Domestic Security and Counterterrorism within the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Mandates the existence of a State Department of Veterans Affairs. And forces all counties to elect a sheriff, tax collector, property appraiser, supervisor of elections, and clerk of courts. Now you may say, well, we already do that. And that's true. Manatee County elects all of those. But if you are in a charter county, anybody here know what a charter county is? Okay, it's a county that's adopted a charter and it's created a new government structure that counties have been able to do for about the last 20 years or so. Because the legislature got tired of all these counties wanting changes in the way they operate and having to do special legislation. So they said, well, what we're going to do is let you all have your own charter, and as long as it's fairly compatible with the state constitution, you'll be able to run your own show. So they did that, and what happened was some of them decided they don't need to elect some of these constitutional officers. Why do we need to elect a tax collector? Did they make policy decisions, or do they just follow rules? Is it sort of like electing the county's bookkeeper or the county's personnel manager? It's just kind of a rote job. And so they made those appointed positions. But now the legislature is saying, no, we don't want you to do that. We want you to elect all of those officers. And if they did that, then I think it's 20 or so counties that have charters. Oddly enough, though, they represent almost 80% of the population of Florida because they're all the big counties. All the larger counties have charters. Why don't we in Manatee County? Well, they just didn't see the need for it at this time. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. Yes. State law already designates the Florida Department of Law Enforcement as the lead agency in coordinating efforts to prevent acts of terrorism. The Constitution requires the legislature to begin a 60-day lawmaking session on the first Tuesday in March in odd number years, but allows the legislature to set a date for even number of years. So this amendment would force the legislature to begin its session on the second Tuesday in January during even number of years. The Constitution currently authorizes the legislature to create a Department of Veterans Affairs. In other words, it's optional. So this would make it, not optional. Okay. This bill repeals the state's ability to prohibit non-citizens from buying, owning, and selling property. It deletes a provision that forces the state to prosecute criminal suspects under the law they were originally charged under, even if the legislature changes that law. And it deletes obsolete language. The Florida's Constitution currently has a clause that allows the Florida legislature to pass laws restricting property rights of aliens ineligible for citizenship. In other words, the legislature has the authority to prevent non-citizens from owning, inheriting, buying, or selling property. Yeah, U.S., yes. Aliens ineligible for citizenship, which means they are not citizens of the United States. Yeah, such restrictions swept the nation in the early 20th century, largely out of fear of the Japanese. So anyway, so this would do away with that law. I don't think it's really occurring very often right now anyway. This is one of those obsolete provision amendments, you know. And the next one's interesting because it's, you know, what happens if, let's say, somebody was convicted of setting off firecrackers in a park, and it was a felony, and they went to jail, and they're still in jail. And then all of a sudden, they make it not a crime to have fireworks in the park. Well, according to this law, they would have to let him out, according to this amendment. Without the amendment, they could leave him in there, even though he was no longer committing a crime because the law had been changed. However, the question does not alter the Constitution's mandate that if a law is repealed altogether, a person arrested before that repeal could still face prosecution. So if they totally did away with the law, let's say that drinking while driving, well, I doubt if they would do away with that. But anyway, they totally did away with the law, they would still have to be, they would still face prosecution. Confusing. It would just not be subject to the stricter sentence under the old law. The third part of the amendment deletes language about high-speed rail. It's another amendment that seemed like a good idea at the time. Well, we really want high-speed rail. That would be great. Let's put it in the Constitution to make sure it happens. Well, it didn't happen. It turned out to be more expensive than they ever thought, and there it sits. So this is part of the cleanup. They would take that out. Expands ethics rules for elected officials. This was another constitutional revision commission. It would make sweeping changes to the state constitution's ethics and government provisions. The proposal that generates most headlines is a 6-year ban on preventing legislators and other elected officials from lobbying the legislature or any other part of state government, which has been widely described as the longest such ban in the nation. Amendment 12 also includes a new prohibition against office holders and public employees using their positions to gain a disproportionate benefit for themselves or their families. That would benefit them or their families. And it's to gain, anytime they're gaining a disproportionate benefit by using their position to get something that helps themselves or their family. I don't think it applies to salaries. I think this is, you know, you'd have to read the whole text of the amendment. But I don't know that it's any time they're using their position to gain a disproportionate benefit for themselves or their families. And I think they're thinking more in the terms of favoritism and bribery, something, not just asking your boss for a raise. Okay, now we're down to the dogs. I love dogs myself, yeah. And I've been to the greyhound races, I'm embarrassed to say. And I even bet on, Fido. But this amendment would end dog racing. Yeah, and this one was taken off the ballot at one point, now it's back on. It would not, actually, they could still race dogs, they just can't bet on them. But if you can't bet them, nobody's going to say, oh, let's have a dog run today just for fun. That's not going to happen, it's the money. That would, yes, it would result in a loss of about $1 million in taxes a year that they tax it. And the league supports getting rid of the dog races. I think it has more to do with their basically being against gambling itself, high-stakes gambling. It's just, yeah. Yeah, well, that's so established. I doubt if that's ever going to go anywhere. Yeah. With greyhounds, there's also a humane aspect, and a lot of people don't like the way the dogs are treated. When they're done they probably get some vitamins, you might say, and also after their racing duns are done, the typical thing to do was to put them to sleep. Well, there are groups that rescue greyhounds. And when I was in Panama City, we had a little event for adoption for greyhounds. And you think they're going to be real jittery dogs, and they're not. They're so laid back, it isn't funny. Most of them just wanted to sleep somewhere. But they were great dogs. Anyway. Yes.
Rosalie, I am confused on Amendment 4, which I believe the League voted against. If I looked at your chart, you were not a supporter of it, and that kind of puzzles me.
No, we're in favor of Amendment 4.
You are?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Not only we're in favor of it, we got literature on the back
Good.
tables and it.
Sorry, the next question is one on prohibiting aliens from buying property. If an alien is not from out of space, but is a non-resident, then it's confusing to me because Miami sells plenty of property to non-residents, and so does other people. How does that take place if it's not allowed?
Well, you've got to read the state statute it refers to. It may have all kinds of loopholes in it. And also, it could just simply be ignored because they know it's not enforceable in court.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Things we can do. The main thing is to vote, really study the issues and, oh, yes.
Question, I'm short. Rosalie, what is the deadline for all of the various appeals that are going on? When does it have to be finalized?
They know they have to do it before the supervisors of elections have to finalize the ballots. And that will be, well, they have to start sending out the absentee ballots a month ahead. They may have to send out some of the overseas ones even sooner. So I'm not sure the exact date, but I would say within the next week or so, they had better come up with an answer on this.
I would think
Otherwise, they'll just stay off the ballot until it's resolved, because it's basically been put on hold until, it's resolved.
Okay, also, I hope you'll bring up the website of the League of Women Voters, because it's a tremendous source for an explanation of the benefits and the League's positions, both the Manatee County League and national and Florida. So I don't know if you have that handy or you can pass it on to folks, but it's a tremendous source.
Yes, I was going to make that as part of my ending remarks, is that we're here to give information, and one of the pieces of that information is our voter's guide. I don't know if you, how many of you used the one for the primary? Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. Wow, a bestseller. And we're going to have one for the general election, and we're also going to have the state league's publication, which will include the amendments and the state officials, and it should include the state judges that are up for renewal, what do they call it? retention votes. So it's going to be a lot of material coming at you. And our website is LWVmanatee.org. It's real easy. You can go in there, scroll down to the Voter Information Center, and you'll find links to our publications and other organizations' publications, and then the website Ballotpedia. And if you go in fact, if you go in Ballotpedia, they've got another section on the amendments that go into even more detail than ours. So if you really want to dig deep into them, ballotpedia.org or .com, I'm not sure, but we've got a link to it on our website. Okay, anything else, or we'll shut down for the day? You're welcome. Thank you. Oh, wait a minute. I got to do a word from our sponsor here, METV. Let's see. METV web. I knew there was something between the METVweb.com. We're going to be showing it on their television station and also online. They'll have a link to our program that'll take you to their YouTube page. And then you'll be able to... Great. Okay. And we also want to thank the Bradenton Women's Club for the use of their hall. They do a big service. They did, this a great building that's been restored after the hurricane. Thank you all for coming. If you have any other questions, feel free to email us.